Welcome to Horns Up, where after 5 weeks of straight up doom, we're finally turning up the death and punk to 11. And that's because we've got a straight up, no holds barred interview with a band from Oakland that's scorching up the season with a blistering album. The album is Mortals, and the band, yes, you know it, Necrot. Now, Peter, this album is certainly getting a lot of positive word of mouth, so much so that it's even hit the Billboard charts. Why do you think that is?
First of all, it's a terrific album. I mean, Mortal has been on repeat, or at least on my playlist for the last month or so that I've had it. So definitely the music on its own stands, but I think the band has also built like a good amount of buzz, over the last few years, and yeah, they've done a great job on this album. So full power to them, man.
Yep, absolutely. I, for one, absolutely loved the production. Played through headphones. It sounds like you're in a jam room with the band. It has that album polish to it, but at the same time, it's still so awesomely raw and energetic that truly, man, it's like it's almost encapsulating a live set, but of course, not at a live gig, but in a garage with the band or in a jam room with the band. It's that intimate. Besides that, the songs themselves don't really leave any room for distraction. And yeah, this is a sweet, sweet, sweet album. So, on to the podcast today. We are talking to Necrot's Luca Indrio. And yes, it's a brutally honest chat about all things mortals and then some. Here we go.
And we're joined by Luca from Necrot. Hi, Luca. How are you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing very good.
Yeah, and we're really glad to have you here on the Horns Up podcast. One thing that I really want to know is that your debut album, Blood Offerings, right? It was so well
Yes.
received both by the underground as well in the mainstream. And, it's surprising for a metal act, but it earned the number 29 spot on, Billboard charts, the hard rock chart, as well as number 52 on the Billboard New Artist. So, with all that, behind you, what were your expectations going into recording Mortal?
Well, we began basically after Blood Offerings came out, 2017. We had like 3 years of intense touring. We played so many shows. We played over 100 shows every year. And we got to tour with some of the best band of death metal that ever existed because we've been on tour with Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Immolation, Suffocation, Exhumed. So we shared the stage with so many good bands through those years that, and we played so many shows that is like we got so much better. We got so much better as a band, and we play better and we are more confident of what we're doing. So it's there was pressure into doing a better album than Blood Offerings, and Blood Offerings was very well received. But at the same time, we knew that we could do it. We knew that this album was gonna be better, and for us, Mortal is way better than Blood Offerings. Not that Blood Offerings is a bad album. I love Blood Offerings. I think it's a great album. But I think that the experience that we had in the 3 years that followed Blood Offerings before Mortal was written and recorded gave us the confidence and the power to make something better, even better.
I've also read that, Necrot has taken a lot of pain in getting, your sound right, right? I mean, you had 3 demos and then the first album. So the question is Mortal the best sound for Necrot?
Yes, definitely. I think so. Yes, it's the best sounding album. We, because also it's like in the last 3 years, we became better musicians, but at the same time, even Greg Wilkinson, the person we recorded with, he also became better at what he was doing. So he also became a better sound engineer, a better studio. He bought new stuff. He learned some new tricks. So it's like we are all progressing. And also it's like we worked for the master. We worked with Alan Duchet, which is one of the best mastering engineers available. So and Greg, the person Greg Wilkinson, the person that recorded and mixed the album, has worked with Alan before. For example, on the new latest High on Fire record that even won some Grammys. And
Yeah.
we're talking
That's
about we were talking about a team of people working with us that is top shelf. Is the best of the best. So it's like, and we have a sound that is very similar to what we sound live. It's not that we go into the studio trying to find something different. We're people that we've been playing music for decades, and like even our guitar player, Sonny Reinhardt, is a sound engineer for live concerts. He has been a sound engineer for 20 years. So it's like he
Oh, okay.
also has a lot of knowledge of how to sound good. And like, so we always sound good. So it's like, and we have people recording us that are really talented and really professional, and they have years and years of experience. So it's like the combination of all these things makes it so that like, they can capture our sound really well, and they can make it sound as good as possible, and I think that the result is fantastic. I think the result is of the album, the way it sounds, the guitar tones, the sound of the drums, the volume of the vocals on top of the music, everything is like exactly where we wanted it to be. So it's like, I think there is also an improvement from Blood Offerings, not only on the songwriting, not only on the fact that we're better musicians, but I think that like we were also the people that recorded and mastered the record are better, and like, that they used to be, and like, and it makes it so the album can sound as good as it can sound. We're very happy with the final result, extremely happy. Also because we know that we put so much work into touring and getting tighter and getting better as a band, and we know we are a better band than we used to be in 2017.
Mm.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm glad you said all of that, because I just like to build on it a little bit. I mean, one of the first things that I took note of on this album was how crisp the drums sound, as well as the fact that they are mixed so bloody well. You've also got the
Absolutely.
cymbals and some of the toms panned left and right that almost mimics the live sound as such that you guys were going for. Can you talk to us about, when you went in to start recording this entire thing, what was the kind of brief as such that you shared with all the engineers as well as the mastering and mixing professionals, etc.? What was the essence as such of the sound that you guys really wanted to capture? Because that for
Well,
me is
we
one of the
we sorry.
shining points on this record.
We wanted it to sound like a good old metal album sounds, like, like an old metal album that sounds great. That's what we wanted it to sound. We didn't want it to sound too modern, but at the same time we didn't want it to sound weak. We still wanted it to sound big, but we didn't want it to sound like, we still like to have drum sound that is as close as possible to natural. Sometimes you have albums where they use a lot of triggers, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
drums are very much
This
on the high
feels as if
mids,
you
and like,
guys have just mic'd the drums up properly. That's
exactly.
it.
That
It's
that's
as
always
simple as
our
that.
goal. That's our goal, and that's also why we sound good when we play live. Is like, we always want to sound live. We always want to sound good and like and play really good. So the work of the person that record us is also much more easier, because once, like, Greg, what he has to do is capture the way we sound, and then also like the person who mastered the record, Alan Duche, is like, he works, is an older person, like, I don't know exactly how old it is, but he might be like 60 or something, and he has been working in the same room, in the same room with mostly the same equipment for like decades. And it's really important when you master an album to know exactly how the room where you work in sounds like. And this is a person that knows this room as well as he knows his pockets, because he has been working there for so long. So it's like he's able to give. I feel that, like, this album sound to me sounds wider. Like you say, like, the drums sound like live, sounds three-dimensional. Like you're in a live concert almost. Like, it takes a lot of. I think the album sounds wider, like bigger, but not bigger in the sense that it gets muddier, or like, is all like, it's like it sounds big, like it's like you're listening to it, and it's like, it's the sound is surrounding you. It's not just all in front of you, if you know what I mean. And I think that's a great
Completely.
talent of the mastering. That's a great talent of Alan Duchesne. Is like, we did step it up. Like, it was like a way more expensive too for the band to get such a, like, a talented, best of the best mastering. But we decided that to do it, that it was worth it, and it is worth it. It is extremely worth it.
I must say, I absolutely agree with you because having really good production actually makes the songs and the songwriting really shine as well. And let's talk about that since we've spoken so much about the production already. Let's talk about the songs itself. There are very few parts on this entire album where the riffs slow down. There's almost no let up throughout, right from the beginning, right to the very end of the 35 odd minutes long that this album is. So the question really is, do you have a method or a formula to pace an album? And would
Yeah.
you mind talking to us a
Mhm.
little bit more about that?
Well, I do have a lot of control because it's like I write all the songs. So it's like, when I write an album, I think about the album in its own entirety. I don't think about like just placing a bunch of songs one next to each other. It's like I do like to keep the album interesting. I do like to think about the album from the perspective of someone who's gonna sit down and actually listen to the whole album. I don't want it just to be a mix of good songs. I want it to be like a good experience from the beginning to the end. And I do have a formula. I do have some like, things that I follow. Like, I like to have like the first song on the intro, for example. I like it to have like an intro that is memorable, an intro that is immediately gets your attention, because I don't want a song with this really long or with a really catchy intro to be in the middle of the album. Like I'm gonna put it at the beginning so that I can get your attention, you know. And then it's like usually I like to have the first few songs to be more direct, more aggressive, while if there is a song that is less easy listening, that is more variegated or a little different for what we usually do, I like it to come, for example, in position number 4, when you already had a first aggressive, maybe faster, more direct listening for the first 3 songs. I put 3 songs that you're able to digest pretty well. And then eventually on the 4th one, I'll put something that it requires a little more of attention, a little more of listening, and that it changes a little bit the vibe of the album so that you don't get bored and I keep your attention, So I do have a way of like, I think that is very important to create an album that is beautiful to listen from the beginning of to the end. That is not just a bunch of songs that are really similar to each other. I like to have our own sound, but I do like to have very different songs because like there is songs on the album that if you listen to them next to each other, they're very different. Like if you
Yeah,
listen to,
yeah.
for example, I don't know if you listen to the whole album, but like if you listen to
Yes.
Stench of Decay, and then
Hmm.
if you listen to the last song, Mortal, they're extremely different songs from each other, but we still have our
Yeah,
tone, we still have my vocals, we still have our style and our sound, so it's the same band, even if the
true.
songs are very different, But it's like, I like to keep it that is like, it makes sense all together, but I like to push it to like kind of like I like to push some song to the limit of like of different things so that the album is like enjoyable to listen through it. And usually when I write a new album, usually when I write the first 2 or 3 songs, I try to write them without thinking too much about it. But then after the first 3 songs, I start thinking about what does the album need. I immediately start thinking about like the positioning of the songs. I start thinking about like, writing a closure song, which is different than thinking about writing a song that is in the middle of the album or at the beginning. So yeah, I do put a lot of thought. There is a lot of thought that I put into it. I don't just write a bunch of songs and then try to paste them together.
Wow, that's so great to hear because I mean, for both Animesh and me, love listening to albums like start to finish, and with Mortal,
Yeah,
it
me too. Me
clearly comes
too.
across. Yeah, but
Thank you.
having said that, what was your musical objective with Mortal? I mean, what message should listeners take away from the songs and the album as a whole?
Well, to me, it's like, I always try and write, like, because to me, it's like, I have, I love the classics. I love, like, the classic Death album. I love the classic Morbid Angel albums. I love the classic Immolation albums. I love the classic early Sepultura album. Those are albums that they're like timeless, that they're gonna stick with people that loves this music forever, you know what I mean? Because they're like they really become part because of the sound, because of the lyrics, because they're complete pieces of art, you know what I mean? They don't miss anything, they're perfect in their entirety. So it's like I always try and strive to create something as close as possible to something like that. So I always try and write an album that is like that can be perceived as something that is got like, you know, those classic tones, those classic sound, those classic solos, the classic songwriting. Because I feel that sometimes, like in the past, bands use the song a song structure that used to be easier, you know, more accessible. Like, you know, they have choruses that repeats, parts that repeats, and like, you know what I mean, a song structure that is a little simpler. Because later on, death metal, I feel like initially I think it was more aggressive and it was more related to punk and thrash metal, while later it became a lot of different things. Like, you know, it became new metal, it became prog death metal. Like, you know, some bands became super fast or super, not super fast, but like, because there was super fast bands
Super
before, but like,
technical.
you know, they became super technical. Yeah, and that became like, you know, something that death metal fans look for. They want a band that is playing something really complicated. Some metal fans are like that. And it's like, to me, I always refer more to things that were more primal, more at the beginning of death metal, more of like, you know, I'm talking about the Nihilist demos, I'm talking about Altars of Madness, I'm talking
Oh
about
yeah.
Dawn of Possession, you know, I'm talking about this classic. For me, when I say classic, that's what I mean. And to me, my dream since I was little, it was like, you know, aspiring to write and create a band that is, can be aspire as much as possible to create something that is in the vein of these amazing things that have been done in the past. But also, it's like, you know,
Mm.
I think I've got this influence. This influence comes a little bit from where I come from too, because it's like I was born in Florence, in Italy,
Okay.
and you know you know the city of Florence, you know the history of it. I don't know if you do, but like maybe you know a little bit of it. But it's like, you know, we had in Florence, we had the Renaissance in the 1500s, no, in the
Uh-huh.
15
Uh-huh.
1600s, and it's like we had these absolute artists that was they were dedicating their life to art, and they created masterpieces that to these days they're unbelievable. You know what I mean? Michelangelo, Raffaello, Donatello, all these amazing artists, no? So when you
Yeah.
grow up in Florence, you have this example of art that is like, we
Mm.
really glorify the classics. We
All
really
right.
glorify the classic as something that is like unrepeatable and untouchable. And as an artist, even if you are a sculptor or an artist that paints, when you grow up in Florence, Italy, what you're aspiring to is to try and do something that is somewhat close to these amazing things that were done in the past. So it's like, you know, I grew up with a little bit of this idea of like, you know, your goal needs to be to create something that can be somewhat, maybe, you know, aspire to do the best you can to do something that can become immortal, like these pieces of art from the past. You know what I mean? And not as much like, you know, a new band that is remembered for being very technical, or creating something completely new. You know, for me, as my goal has always been like, you know, create somewhat of something that can be a classic. You know what I mean? And only time can tell
Mm.
if something is a classic or not. But like, you know, for me, my aspiration of beauty is always creating something that can be somewhat recreating the feelings that people get when they look at one of those art pieces of art from the past, from these beautiful periods, or like, or people that can get that feeling when they listen to one of these classic albums of death metal, like, you know what I mean, like, or you know, the first Bolt Thrower, Rome of Chaos from Bolt Thrower, you know what I mean, or something like that. That is something that is untouchable and immortal forever because of his, you know, is like his transcend beyond beauty. You know, is something else, and it's like, to me, it's like, you know, I'm not saying that like my band is anything like that. It's like, you know, we are a relatively new band, but I can tell you that that's always been our aspiration to be like, you know, because we will listen to these classic albums and be like, this music is unbelievable. And I remember having this conversation even with Chad when we first started. I'll be like, how did they do that? And like me and Chad were like, they were probably playing all day every day. So that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to practice every day because we wanted to really push our talent to the maximum extent of it. You know what I mean? With no limits. And it's like, even since we started playing so many shows, we have been able to improve so much and like push our talents to the very maximum by doing it so much, you know, and dedicated so much time to it. That is like, sometimes, you know, you get the confidence that maybe because you know how hard you've been working for it, you get the confidence that maybe you'll be able to do something like that one day, you know, or at least something close to it, or at least aspire and trying to do the best you can. But at the same
Hmm.
time, with the consciousness of the hard work you're putting, so it's like, you know, you start to believe that maybe you can do something great, you know, because you
Yeah,
really are
yeah,
putting your best effort into it. It's not just something that you're doing half-assed, you know, and then hoping for a great result. You know, it's something that you're doing to the maximum and then hoping for a great result, if you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. Of course. No, I
Yeah.
mean, what you just said helps helps us understand one of the lines in your press release as such, to the absolute perfect degree. And it's a line that goes, and I quote, "We always wanted to write an album that 20 years from now would be remembered as a true classic of the genre." Right? That's an actual quote that you guys have used
Yes,
in your press note. So now, so here's the flip side of the question, right? Why
yes.
is this? Why do you have this need for permanence? I mean, there's always the idea that an album is a product of its own context and its own circumstances and its own reality, right? That's the flip side of
Yes.
it. But
Well,
why is there a need to bring for the album to be this permanent as such?
to me, because it's like, for me, an album to be considered a true immortal thing, classic, it needs to be completed. So it needs to have, like, you know, great music, great performance, great guitar solos too, but at the same time also lyrics that can be applied now as they can be applied to the future. Like, you know, sometimes you listen to songs from the 80s or the 90s and you listen to the lyrics, and to this day, like 40 years later, they're still very actual. They still make total sense today. You know what I mean? And I feel that, like, you know, Necrot is also a band that, like, my lyrics, they're not complicated. You know, I'm not using words that people don't understand. I'm not writing things that I saw on someone else's book. Like, since the beginning, we had very direct lyrics, and our lyrics have always been political, and there's always talk about social issues, but they've also always been very philosophical and talk about, like, you know, our mortal condition, and, like, you know, the fact that, like, you know, we are here, but we are really some, you know, like the song Shadows and Light from Blood Offerings talks about, like, you know, detaching from your mortal life and the things that that brings you to believe, you know, and live your life knowing that everything is gonna end, and know that everything is impermanent, and, like, you know, your life is gonna end. The people that you love, you're gonna lose them sooner or later, or even the things that you have, your job, your house, everything can be gone, your health, you know. So it's like, it's important to live your life detached, a little bit detached from reality, because reality is terrible. And it's like, you know, we live in a world that is based on injustice, and we see injustice every day, even when you walk out of your house. And that's also Stench of Decay talks about that, you know. People are driven by greed and driven by the research of power and money and success, and, like, they don't look in anybody's eyes, and they're ready to do horrible things to achieve things that, like, you know, they think they're so important, because they're so attached to their mortal life, and they're so attached to this reality and this planet, when the reality is that is, like, I truly believe that we are way more than, like, just mortal human being. That is, like, you know, the things that happens on this planet, I don't believe they're that important. And it's like, you know, people spend so much time getting mad and losing their minds because they lost a person, because they lost something, because something didn't go the way they expected, or like, and it's like, that's a way of living that always brings to suffering, and always brings you to live life in a way that is that is it will bring you suffering, because you're always going to have this expectation. And also it's like, live it. That's why we call this album Mortal too, because for me this has always been like such a thematic that is so important, of being like, know that you're mortal, and know that not only you're gonna die when your life ends, but you're gonna die a million times during your life. And I feel that like this pandemic is teaching people this too a lot, because lots of people right now are losing everything, or they're losing what they thought. Sometimes people have eventually have worked on a business and creating a family for 20 years and whatnot, and right now eventually they're losing their house, they're losing their job, or like eventually they're even losing their wife or their relationship. And people are, if you live like you always are entitled to all the things that you have, you're always gonna suffer more than you're supposed to. And like, for us, it's like, this philosophical way of seeing and then talking in the lyrics of our mortality, and like detachment from like our material world, and like is part of our lyrics, together with like, social injustice, and all of this has always been part of our lyrics. And I feel like the more and more time goes by, and the more our lyrics are relevant to the reality of the present time, and probably also the future. Like, I feel that like our lyrics don't talk about specific things of the present, but talk about something that is the human condition, which will always be. So that's also like, I feel like that's something that, if you're trying to do something that will last a long time, is good to have content that is very direct and talks about eventually things that people don't like to think about, but it's important that people thinks about, and it's important that people face this kind of reality. And it's like, to us, I feel that like my lyrics are gonna be as valid, like even the lyrics from our first song we ever wrote, that we wrote in 2011, that is called Consume Control, talks about the social condition of being used by by society, by the governments, to make you believe that you're gonna be rich and that you're gonna have all this comfort, but in the reality all that they are selling you is like, they just want your time, they just want you to be bound to working forever. That's why they want you to believe you can afford things that you cannot afford, and they let you pay for them a little bit every month, but then it's like every month you get like more and more uh, enslaved in the
Greedy
work
and
system that
enslaved, yeah.
never allows you to be free, because you're always behind into paying all these things that you like, they make you believe that you need for your comfort. But truly, if you don't have a television, you're still gonna be happy, because you still have books, you still have people to talk with, you still have other things to do. And it's like, if you don't have a house that is so big, it doesn't matter, because do you really need such a big house? You know what I mean? When you have the
Mm-hmm.
whole world for you, because you can walk out of your house and go to the park, you can walk out of your house and go to wherever you want, and that's all for everybody. You know what I mean? Why do you need so much private property to feel good? You know what I mean? And so it's like, people end up feeling trapped, because it's like, they always have to pay for this life that they feel like they need. And the more comfort they get, the more they get used to it, and the more they'll sacrifice their time and their true passions to work and work and work to pay for all these things. And it's like, this is a psychological trap where so many people lives. And it's like, we talk about these things, we used to talk about these things in a song that came out 9 years ago, and that made sense 9 years ago and still made sense now, and it's still gonna make sense in 20, 30 years. You know what I mean? Because it's the human condition, it's the world where we live, is the reality, and it's like our mortal condition. Is like, I like to talk about things in our lyrics that there are things that humans are always gonna have to face. So it's like, you're never gonna hear me speak about like a specific matter that is happening right now that eventually in 10 years doesn't even make sense to talk about. I like to talk about things that are always related to the human
Mm-hmm.
condition. And I think that there is a lot of bands like that in the past. And like, even the band Death, even Chuck Schuldiner, for me,
Yeah.
like, of course,
Yeah.
for example, like, Max Cavalera has always been obviously very political, because he really talks in his song about demonstrations and social injustice and all of this. And like,
True. True.
but like, for example, for me, Chuck Schuldiner, as someone that has always been super political in his lyrics without being obvious about it, without talking
Exactly.
about
Yeah.
Oh
specific
yeah.
situations. But it's like, he talks about like, how easy it is to deny the pain of someone else's suffering, how relevant it is to this day, that, you know what I mean? Or like, asking for a suicide machine, or asking,
Yeah.
it talks about when, that when the people of power, once they're wanting you, those with power will be there. You know what I mean? Who is he talking about? You know what I mean? It's extremely political, and people don't realize is that. And there is so
True.
many people that, like, they say, like, keep politics outside of metal, and they say that. They say
That's
that while they're wearing a Death T-shirt, while they're wearing, while they're listening to a Sepultura album from 1991, while they're listening to these lyrics, that they are extremely political. And of course, it's like, to me, it's kind of silly, because it's like, when you're doing aggressive, extreme, obscure music, you're already catering to people that they're not
yeah.
exactly fitting into the society. They're not exactly fitting into what society wants you to be. So it's like already creating a music that is, for so many people, is so disturbing to listen to, because it's not harmonious. It's not just beautiful for everybody. It takes a certain kind of person to understand it. It's like, already wanting to create a music that is like that. It's already an extremely political statement.
Hmm. We talked so much about death, and I just like to ask you one thing over here. That's an awesome, like the fact that we've talked about it uh, is why I'm bringing this question up actually, because it's actually more of an observation. There's the fourth track on the album, right? Asleep Forever, that has this lovely
Uh-huh.
solo section in the middle, where the
Absolutely.
guitar is, yeah, where you have a really powerful solo over there. I don't know, but the
Yes.
the first feeling that I got upon listening to it was, oh my God, this sounds just like a Chuck Schuldiner song.
Oh,
I
the
thought I was the
solo, the
only
Part
one,
solo.
huh?
is that like, was that intentional? Am I even close as to that being an influence of it?
No, yeah, definitely. Chuck Schuldiner has always been like a big influence for me. But it's like, I have to tell you that like my influences come from a lot of bands, like not just one or two, not even 10, come from more than 10 bands, come from a variety of bands. And some of them are not even metal. Some of them are punk bands. Some of them are Italian punk bands that nobody even gives a shit about. And it's like, but like definitely Chuck Schuldiner is like a huge influence. Absolutely. Absolutely. A huge influence. Definitely. It's like, for me, it's also like, what I learned a lot from the band Death is also like creating a song structure, like a rhythm
Mm-hmm.
section for solos. I
Yeah,
did
yeah.
study, like, I do study this band, and I do, like, because it's like, I know Sonny, our guitar player, is a really extremely talented guitar player. He's 46 years old, and he's like, he has been playing since he was 15, and he's like, he was already like a known talent by the time he was 17. He has played for like even like pop bands in front
Oh
of
wow.
thousands of people. Yeah, he was immediately recognized as a very talented person. And he's like, he has played in bands that has played, shows with Ozzy Osbourne. And like, he has played like really big shows and like collaborated in a lot. He's an amazing guitar player. And he's like, I know how talented he is, and to me, it's like, because I write the songs, I write the rhythm section, I write all of them. So it's like I study like how can I create parts for solos that can give Sonny a way for him to express the best, the best that he can be, the best that he can do. So I felt the responsibility of creating rhythm sections that were very catered to a really great solo guitar player. So I did, you're right, I did listen to like Death. I listened to like other bands, Morbid Angel, bands that have like amazing solos, you know what I mean? And instead of concentrating on the solo, because it's like, I concentrated more on the feeling that the rhythm under the solo can give to the song, and also can give to the solo. And I concentrated more of like certain changes of tempos can create the base for like an amazing solo that really has a feeling to it, that is not just like, some random riffs. And then I'm like, hey Sonny, here's like, this really complicated riff, why don't you write a solo on top of it? I'm like, I'm thinking about giving Sonny like different tempos, ways that like the tempo changes, so then the notes changes, so that it can change from a feeling into the solo into the other one, because it's like the drums and the rhythm define so much the feeling of a riff, because you can write a riff that can sound really evil with a certain drum beat. It sounds very evil, but eventually you change the drum beat and it sounds very aggressive, and all of a sudden it doesn't sound as evil anymore. Or like if you change the drumming again, can even sound more depressive and less aggressive. So it's like the riff itself can change so much the feeling that he has to it when you change the drum beat under it. So it's like I concentrated a lot on like the different feelings that music and solo get while by changing the drum beats. So it's like that's something, some more work. I paid more attention into
Yeah,
that
yeah.
while I was writing Mortal rather than when I was writing Blood Offerings, because like
Mm.
initially like the band was born as just me and the drummer. So it's like we did not have a guitar player for the first 2 years of the band. So I was writing song and I was recording the guitar, but like I know how to play the guitar, but I don't know how to do solos. And so it's like I always initially, if you listen to the first two demos of Necro, there is no solos. And then if you listen to the third demo, which is called The Abyss, that's when
Yeah.
Sonny joined, and finally we had a guitar player. And it's like I was still writing songs in for the from the perspective of someone that doesn't really thinks about solos. I was always writing songs that would function and they would be still perfect and really enjoyable without needing a solo. So eventually the bass riff that I was giving to Sonny to write a solo on top of it eventually was a super cool riff that could have stand on his own too without a solo, but eventually wasn't the best for someone who was trying to write a solo on top of it. Instead of Mortal, I concentrated more on like writing parts that were more like eventually that by themselves on their own, eventually they would be boring, but eventually they give so much more room to Sonny
Exactly.
to fully
It was
express the most
complementing. It
most
was
of his
complementing
talent.
rather than, yep.
So it's like for me, yeah, there was, that's why I'm telling you, it's like, from 2017, we played so many shows together. And also it's like, I got to learn and study more. And I got to learn also more about Sonny. I got to learn more about Chad, the drummer. I got to learn more about like, the best qualities of the people I play with. And being someone who writes the songs, I have the responsibility to like write music that I like, that we all like, but also write music that it caters to their best talents. You know what I mean? Something that can amplify what's their best talents. Because I do think about that when I write songs too. It's like I write songs that amplify even my talents. I write songs that caters to my taste, but also that caters to my skills. So then I started thinking more about like giving Sonny some rhythm basis for solo where he can really express himself to the maximum. And I think it's like all this work that we put behind it is like I'm glad that you guys are noticing. You know what I mean? People are able to notice it without before even I explain it. So it's great. It's working.
Great.
Yeah. So, we've talked so much about Mortal and everything that went into it. Uh, we'd like to play a song from the album. Which one should we
Sure.
play and why?
Well, I think you should play Asleep Forever. And it's like that's because it's like it's a song that I'm really proud of, because
Yeah.
I feel that is a little bit more melodic than our usual standards, and is a song that for me is just something that like when I wrote it, I loved it, and but I had more doubts about it than the other songs because I felt that it was like the one song that was a little more different. And at the same time, I was worried too. The way I was imagining the vocals, I was worried that I wasn't gonna be able to sing it or to translate it exactly the way I imagine it. Because it's like I always imagine how my singing needs to sound on top of a song, but then it's like you really have to practice it and then go and record it and re-listen to it to really understand if that's gonna eventually translate exactly how you were imagining it. You know what I mean? And with Asleep Forever, it was like that. It's like, I got into the studio and like hoping that it was gonna translate exactly as my vision was, and it happened. It happened. We were able to do that, and it's like I was really satisfied with it, because for me it was a little bit more of like a gamble than other songs of ours that like have more of like classic Necrot sound, classic Necrot riffs. You know what I mean? That belongs to this one for me is a little bit is a slightly different, but at the same time you listen to it and you can still tell that is us. It's not like something absurd. And at the same time, yeah, I'm just super happy that like my vision translated exactly how the way I was hoping it was gonna happen. So yeah, I think you should play it.
Awesome. So here it is. Here's Asleep Forever.
Inside,
So, I'm really glad you picked Sleep Forever because the amount of time I've spent with the album so far, that's the standout track for me. But, you
Awesome.
know, yeah. So, Luca, we've talked quite a bit. Here's our final question. Uh, and we're
Yes.
going to kind of probably give you a crystal ball for this. But what's next for What's next for Necrot? I mean, after, of course, the whole Mortal album cycle, of course, and, whenever things get normal again, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's next for Necrot is hopefully going back to our usual routine, which is like, playing a lot of shows and traveling and playing shows and working hard. But it's like, if you have to ask me, like right now, is like really what's next for Necrot is try to survive, try not to lose our apartment. The
Uh,
situation. I don't know. In the United States right now is really bad, and like we live in a place that is got really expensive through the years, the Bay Area because of the tech industry. So it's like life there was already getting complicated, and now with coronavirus and all of these, it got much more complicated. So it's like right now it's like what's next for Necrot is like surviving, but then of course as soon as we'll be able to get back on playing shows, that's what's gonna happen. But at the same time, we don't have the crystal ball, and like this could take months, it could take years, or things could
yeah.
never go back the way they were. So it's like we're not holding our breath. So it's like we're gonna have to adapt as things move on. But like we are ready. Any moment we're ready to go on back on the road as soon as we can. But like we right now is we are more worried about like personal life and like personal expenses and rent and how to come up with the money and all of that. So like right now we'll see, but like the band is gonna continue, and if if a year from now, if 6 months from now, there is still no possibility to play concerts or anything in the future like that, we're probably gonna start concentrating on another album, on writing more music, and keeping ourselves busy with the band in other ways. But we're definitely not gonna be crying about it. You know what I mean? Whatever comes will come. But like
Exactly.
we were
There's
all
no
Yeah.
point about
we were
just
all
saying
upset.
yeah.
But it's like, yeah, yeah, that's a loser mentality to just sit down and cry for what used to be. That's not what we
Mm.
want. That's not how we want to live. So it's like right now we try and stay positive and like and we're gonna continue as a band to the maximum extent that we're allowed. But like we're not holding our breaths. We're not depressed. We're not at home sad because we miss so many shows and things might never come back to normal. No, that's not how we are. So we're gonna be okay.
Awesome.
Excellent. On that note, Luca, thank you so much for your time. This was an
Thank you.
excellent
And
conversation.
if you know anybody in India that wants to fly us out to India to book a show for Necrot, well, we like to come.
That'll be
Definitely.
awesome. That'll be awesome. And plus,
we we would
just
love
a
to come.
just a highlight here. Uh, we just have to shell out for maybe like 3 tickets for the band. That's it.
Yeah.
Totally. Why not?
All
Exactly.
right. Excellent, Luca. Thank you so much once again, and horns up.
Horns up, man.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the very thoughtful interview. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
I love it when we can geek out about details. Yes, I've heard and know that sometimes the larger picture matters the most, but damn, details, they matter so damn much.
I know that there are a lot of bands that are doing the death metal and punk recently, but the sound that they've got Necrot on this album Mortal really helps them stand out from the rest.
I'd absolutely kill for a 8 track or an analog cassette master version of this album. It fits that vibe, doesn't it?
I'd actually love to hear this on vinyl for some reason. I mean, one of the cool things about the few vinyl I've heard is that it actually makes you feel like you're in the room with the artist. So actually, yeah, I mean, this is one of those albums, I guess, what I can get from both of us is we'd enjoy it in a more like analog fashion, right? As opposed to just listening to it on an MP3 or even on any of the streaming platforms.
Maybe, but then again, I think the boys at Necrot have done such a fabulous job with production that they give you all that analog energy and that analog authenticity right here on the digital platform as such. Yeah. So it's one of those modern albums that really doesn't sound modern, but it actually makes it, but it actually sounds way classic. And that's something I really appreciate. Anyways, that's a wrap on this episode. You should have this memorized by now. Reach out to us at hornsupod.com or on the Twitter machine at hornsupod. I'm at Asmawani.
I'm at Trend Crusher.
And this is Horns Up.
Horns up, guys.